Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I would do a reaction video to the Women's Prize Longlist announcement. As I'm filming this, it is Wednesday the 9th of March, and yesterday, which was International Women's Day, the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2022 was announced, which was very exciting. So I didn't make a predictions video, however I did write a list of the books that I thought might be on there. And we'll go through that a bit later on, but let me tell you, I only got 3 correct. There are only 3 books that I predicted would be on the long list that are on there. Out of the 16 books on the long list, I've only read 2 already. 1 I have DNF'd, and about half the books on this list I had never heard of before, which I think is really exciting because hopefully it means there's lots of great books to be discovered. Of the 16 books longlisted, 5 are debut novels, a quarter are published by independent presses. So I thought we could look through the list together. I spent quite a long time yesterday evening looking up the books, seeing what they're about, particularly the books that I had never heard of before, and seeing if I could get my hands on a copy of them from my library. So, first book on the list is The Bread the Devil Need by Lisa Allen Agostini, who is a Trinidadian author, and this is a debut novel. I had never heard of this book before. It's about a woman who's about to turn 40, who has a successful life professionally and so on, but behind closed doors she is in an abusive relationship. It's about gender violence and racism. It sounds like it could be quite a difficult read, but it does sound good. Sadly, my library doesn't have a copy. What I think I'll do with the ones that I can't get a hold of from my library is I think I'll see what, as reviews are coming in, see what other people think of them, and then if it's something I particularly want to read, then I'll maybe buy a copy. Next book on the list is Salt Lick by Lulu Allison, who is a British author. This sounds really interesting. So it's set in a society where the rural economy has collapsed and people are moving to cities. We follow main characters who are finding out about their past. There is a chorus of feral cows, and it's described as being quite a dystopic novel, which I like the sound of. Sadly, my library doesn't have a copy, but that is one that I would be quite keen to read, so I'm interested to see what people think of that one. Next book is Careless by Kirsty Capes, who is a British author. This is a debut novel. It's about a 15-year-old in care who becomes pregnant, and it's described as being a coming-of-age story. Sounds good. I've reserved a copy from the library. Next book is Remote Sympathy by Catherine Chidgey, who is from New Zealand. This is set in and around a concentration camp in Germany, and we follow the wives of officers who work in the concentration camp. And these wives are living like the life of luxury, and it's about humankind's ability to look the other way. It does sound interesting. Sadly, my library doesn't have a copy. None of the books so far I've ever heard of before. Next book, The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller, who is an American author. This is a debut novel. This is a book I have heard of. Recently I've heard a couple of people mention The Paper Palace, but I didn't really know anything what it was about. So this is about a woman who's married with a family, but she's been hiding a devastating secret, and it is told in flashbacks. It sounds like the kind of thing I might like, and I have reserved a copy of that. Next is Flamingo by Rachel Elliott, who is a British author, another one I had not heard of before. We follow 2 families in 2 timelines, so the 80s and 2018, and it's about acceptance and love in its myriad forms. I've reserved a copy. Next book I have read. This is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, who is an American author. I read this last month, so I talked about it in my last month's wrap-up. So The Sentence is largely set in a bookshop, and it's based on a real-life bookshop which Louise Erdrich owns, and our main character is called Tuki, who works in the bookshop. She is being haunted by a previous customer called Flora who's died, and Tuki is trying to figure out why Flora is haunting the bookshop, and particularly her. It's not a typical ghost story in that it's not spooky. There is some intrigue. It is quite funny in parts. It also touches on real life current events, racism, prejudice. There were some things about the book that didn't work for me, but overall I thought it was a good read and I would recommend it. Next up is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper Smith, who is an American author. This is a debut novel. I have heard of this before. I already reserved it at the library a couple of weeks ago. I'm waiting for it to come in. This is about two Vietnamese women who go missing decades apart. It's set in 1986 and 2011. It's described as being like a fever dream and it features ghosts. Sounds good. Next on the list is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, who is from New Zealand. I have heard of this book before without actually knowing anything about it. So this is about a woman going through a separation. She's about to turn 40. She is struggling with mental illness and it's meant to be quite a funny book as well. Sounds interesting and I've reserved it. Next book is The Exhibitionist by Charlotte Mendelsohn, who is a British author. Another book I've never heard of before. It's blurbed by Sarah Waters, which is always a good sign. It's set in a family gathering for an art exhibition. Secrets are coming out. It's described as being about art, sacrifice, toxic family politics, queer desire and personal freedom. It sounds good. I've reserved it from the library. I'm actually in a queue for this one. So we'll see how soon I can get a hold of it. Next is The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki, who is an American-Canadian author. I have heard of this book, but again, didn't know anything about it. It's about a 13-year-old boy who's grieving after the death of his father, and he starts hearing voices, so the objects in his home start to talk to him. And the boy seeks refuge in the library where the objects are more well-behaved and more softly spoken. I think if I'd have known what that was about, I would have already tried to read it. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I've reserved a copy. The next book is This One Sky Day by Leonie Ross, who is a British author, a book I have heard of before. This is the first one where I did predict it would be on the long list. And this is actually the book that I DNF last year. So This One Sky Day is published as Poppy Show in the USA, I believe. And it is set on the island of Poppy Show, where the inhabitants all have these different sort of magical powers. When I DNF'd it, I think I hadn't read that much of it, and I feel like maybe I wasn't quite in the mood for it at the time. So it is a book that for a while now I've been thinking I would quite like to give another go, which I don't often do with DNFs. However, when I've heard people talk about it since, and I've heard some of the stuff that happens later on in the book, it sounds kind of wild, and I think I would like to give that another go at some point. I haven't reserved it from the library yet, because I want to give some of the other books on the list a go first, but I'll probably try to reread it at some point. Next is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, who is a Turkish-British author. This is another one that I did predict would be on the long list. I have it out at the moment from the library because I was anticipating it being on the long list. So this is set in Cyprus in 1974. We follow two teenagers from different backgrounds who meet in secret, and their meetings are witnessed by a fig tree who narrates part of the story. And then we have a second timeline, decades later, following a teenager in London who is looking into her past. Sounds interesting. I read 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak a couple of years ago, and since then I have been meaning to read more by Elif Shafak, but for some reason I just haven't. So this is a good opportunity to do so. I'm really looking forward to this one. Next is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, who is an American author. This is another one that I did predict was going to be on the long list. I have read Great Circle. I read this last year. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. It's quite a long book. It's about the life of an aspiring female aviator, and it's interspersed with a present day storyline of a young Hollywood actress who is going to be playing this aviator in a film of her life. I wasn't that keen on Great Circle because I think largely because I don't really like epic stories. So like where we're following a character throughout the whole of their lifetime, that's not normally my favourite thing. So yeah, I didn't really like it, but like everyone else I've heard talk about it has said overwhelmingly positive things, so I think I'm just an outlier on that one. Next we have the final revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton, who is an American author. This is another debut novel. This is a book that I had heard of before. We follow Opal, who is a black punk artist, and Nev, who is a singer-songwriter, who I think joined forces to form a band. That's set in the 70s in New York, and then we have a current timeline where they are considering reuniting, and then some secrets start coming out. I'm not sure if it's necessarily my kind of thing, and my library doesn't have a copy either. And then the final book on the long list is Creatures of Passage by Maroa Yajide, who is an American author, another one I have not heard of before, set in the 70s in Washington DC, and we follow a taxi driver who is ferrying ill-fated passengers in a haunted car. We have a boy who witnesses and struggles to make sense of something he witnesses at school, and it's described as being a modern day fable. My library does not have a copy of that. So that is the long list. So two of them I've read before, which is Great Circle and The Sentence. Only three that I predicted would be there, which is Great Circle, The Island of Missing Trees, and This One Sky Day. In terms of the ones that I am particularly keen to read, I would say they would be The Island of Missing Trees, The Book of Form and Emptiness, Build Your House Around My Body, possibly Sorrow and Bliss as well. But I have reserved all that I can from the library, so hopefully I'll be able to pick them up at the weekend. In terms of what I thought might have been on the list, The Fortune Men by Andnev Mohammed I thought might have been there. Beautiful World, Where Are You?, which I got out from the library because I was anticipating it being on the list, and it's not. I actually started to read this last week and I have DNF'd it. But it's not on the long list anyway, so that's fine. Another one that I have out, Devotion by Hannah Kent, I thought might have been on there. Haven't read this yet, but very much looking forward to. Our Wives Under the Sea, I'm looking forward to reading that. I thought that might be there. I thought The New Marion Keys might have been on there. To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara, which I actually DNF'd last month, but I thought that might have been on there. The Other Black Girl, surprised that's not there. The New Monica Ali, The Fell, Fault Lines by Emily Tommy, which is a book I enjoyed last year. Yeah, so there's a number of books I'm quite surprised that are not on there, but I think it's a really exciting list. So shortlist is announced on the 27th of April, so we've got I think about 6 or 7 weeks until then, and then the winner is announced on the 15th of June. So let me know what you think of the long list. Are there any of the long list that you've read? Particularly interested to hear if you've read any of those books which are less well known, shall we say. Are you surprised by any books that aren't on there? Let me know what you think. It's a very exciting time. I'm so excited to check out all these books and find out more about them. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.